Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind, our 94th episode. We are back once again to chat about some TV. But before we do, Niles, how have you been the last couple weeks since we last recorded?
Much better than the last ones before that. It's been good. Lately, I feel like it's just been a lot of admin stuff in my life.
Yeah.
Just admin shit. I don't know. Just having to go get emissions tests, bullshit like that for the environment. But I've been good though. Otherwise, it's been a good few weeks since we last recorded. How about you? How have you been doing?
Doing pretty good. Staying incredibly busy with work, as always. Had some family in town, which was some good fun. Had a little bit of admin stuff, too. Air conditioning's broken again. That hasn't been so fun.
Man,
It's been really fucking hot.
That's nonstop with your building. Every time I feel like we have an episode, it's like something else is broken in my apartment.
Broke again.
building.
Yeah, they said it was fixed today, and it will be back up and running by noon tomorrow. So, fingers crossed that this whole saga is over because it is an oven in here right now.
Fingers crossed for you.
Yeah, thanks. But we are here not to talk about my air conditioning, as fascinating as that probably is for everyone listening. We are here to talk about House of the Dragon Season 2. We reviewed the first season a while back in the earlier stage of our show, I suppose. But House of the Dragon Season 2 picks up where the last season left off and follows the Blacks and the Greens as they reel from the consequences of last season's losses and prepare for war. The show once again stars Emma D'Arcy, Olivia Cooke, Matt Smith, Rhys Ifans, Fabian Frankel, and many, many more. Non-spoiler thoughts for a few minutes, and then we'll just go full discussion after that, as usual. Niles, what are your initial non-spoilery thoughts on House of the Dragon Season 2?
Well, before we dive in, I just want to say if you haven't watched Season 2 yet, or you want to know our thoughts on Season 1, and you've seen that season, please go check out our episode from last year because I feel like we had a great discussion on just all the themes, everything that happened in Season 1. We're not really going to be touching any of that today. This is just Season 2. So, go check that out if you haven't already.
Yes.
And I'll say for this season of House of the Dragon, I feel like this is another strong season, in my opinion. I just love the drama. I love the vibes. I love the fucking Targaryens just being just the worst kinds of people on both sides. But also, there's some redeeming qualities in there too. And I think it's a really strong season overall. I think the first half of it, like the first 4 episodes, pretty strong. I think those are the peak of the season in a way. And I think the second half is a little weaker. And there's a part of me, without getting too far into spoilers, I feel like you do kind of expect climactic showdowns at the end of seasons of fantasy shows like this. But we didn't really get that this time. But that's kind of how the old Game of Thrones series was, Like sometimes it would end like the season with a big, huge battle that was just like really intense, and then some seasons it would be like, nope, not this time.
It became their format. It became their format to have like an episode 9 big action climax, and episode 10 was kind of the setup for the next season in a lot of ways. And to that point, like this season was 8 episodes. They're usually 10 for Game of Thrones, and for the first season of this, apparently Warner Brothers Discovery told them no, not 10 this time, cut it down to 8. And I think what you are feeling is a symptom of that.
Yeah, that's probably a little bit of that. But, that's okay because it's just going to build. And next season, I feel like they've really promised a very bloody climactic season, lots of war. And I think this season, it really ultimately shows for me just how petty and vindictive war can be. This whole kind of thing, it just came from a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, and all this blood and turmoil and death. It just escalates and escalates and escalates. It's like an eye for an eye, a son for a son. Things just, it's just one for one kind of jabs and attacks, and it's really just kind of like, at the end of the day, guys, just let it go. This is so petty in a way, but
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. This is people's lives, I guess. These characters, so whatever. But what about you? What are some of your initial thoughts on season 2?
Yeah, so I also thought this was a really strong season, and I do understand why you and many people felt this season was unfinished and that it needed those originally planned 2 more episodes. I don't even disagree with that. I think it's true. I just don't. It didn't bother me for some reason, and I don't know why. I don't really get it. But one thing I was thinking about today, which is kind of funny, this show is about the event in the Song of Ice and Fire history called the Dance of the Dragons. And this season ends before a probably very climactic battle, which will then now be pushed into the beginning of next season, which is very similar to Book 5 of A Song of Ice and Fire, which is called A Dance of Dragons, where, if you remember from that book, George could not figure out how to resolve all those plot lines yet, so he just did not include the climactic battle of that book in that book, remember? And it's going to be pushed into the Winds of Winter, which is going to, in both cases, I think it's going to have a weird effect on the pacing of the next entries of each of these things. I was thinking about that today. I'm like, that's very funny that it was in that book, which is named that, which is in reference to this event that the show is about.
That's a really good observation.
Yeah. But I was surprised, actually, in this season by some of the characters who ended up starring in a couple of my favorite bits of the season.
Yeah.
And I think this season carries on a tradition with this franchise in, like, making characters that you hated in previous seasons for very justifiable reasons into more complex, interesting, and sometimes even funny people that a part of you roots for, even though they're bad. This universe is so great at humanizing everybody and giving you every character's perspective and outlining, like, the things or the reasons they do the things they do. I wouldn't say anyone gets, like, as much of a recontextualization as someone like Jaime Lannister in the original series did. Like, he goes from someone who you see as a full villain early on to being like, oh man, by book 4, you're like Team Jaime all the way, right? Like, Jaime is
100%.
He's very much a character whose corner you were in at that point. No one quite like that, but I enjoy that element of this universe and the storytelling at play here. And yeah, and like, as always with both this and Game of Thrones, everything on the production side is incredible to witness, from the set design to the special effects to the music to the performances. Just fantastic across the board.
Costuming.
It's really great.
Yeah. Wardrobe, amazing set design, performances. Yeah, I got that too. I think it's the aesthetic of this show is so great. And so my partner's been watching season 1 because she wanted to get caught up, and she's been watching season 2 a little bit with me, and she made a very good observation of, like, yeah, even though it's just a few 100-year difference between Game of Thrones, it's like, it looks so different. Like, it looks like medieval compared to, like, Renaissance. You know what I mean? Like, the costuming's just subtly different enough where it's just like, oh, it feels like, yeah, there's a progression from this to the Game of Thrones that we know. And I thought that was, you can kind of see that sometimes in some of these costumings.
Yeah, because it's like House of Dragon takes place, at least the section of the show we've seen so far, it's like the Targaryens at the height of their dynastic power. I think we talked about that in our last episode regarding the tournament scene from the first episode, contrasting that with the tournament in season 1 of Game of Thrones during Robert's reign. And you see just how much the wealth of the kingdoms and the glory of it all has diminished, you know, in the couple hundred years since then. And I just love with this story the whole vibe of it to me is like a runaway train heading towards complete catastrophe that did not need to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And there is a couple people who are like trying to hold it at bay, but most of the characters are like, all right, let's fucking go. Let's speed up this train. Let's get going. and and I really love that push and pull between the characters. But before we move on to spoilers, I did want to talk about, and I've alluded to it in past episodes as this season was coming out, but I want to talk about the fan base, specifically the online fan base for this show, because I think they are two things primarily: toxic and stupid. And I will explain why. So the House of the Dragon fandom, first of all, seems to have embraced the behavior of the Star Wars fandom and taken it upon themselves to begin harassing actors who play characters they don't like. This is something that Star Wars fans seem to do to everyone who's a minority. Not everyone in any of these fandoms does this, obviously. There are small sections of people who engage in this inappropriate behavior. But Fabian Frankel, who plays Kristen Cole, deleted his social media stuff because people kept harassing him for the behavior of Cole. It's
wow.
It just portrays such a childish understanding of the way things work. They did this with the actor who played Rictus Erectus in Furiosa too. They started coming after him because there was a scene that implied that Rictus might like assault Furiosa.
Right.
And so they started harassing the actor for the behavior of his character, who's supposed to be a villain. And it just... So it's like, I'm sick of seeing that shit. It's a very chronically online, entitled way to behave, to go after these real people for the behavior of fictional characters who are enemies of the people you stan. Just fuck off with that. Like, delete all your social media accounts, go to therapy, and speak to real human beings about real problems for once in your fucking life. So completely unacceptable. Second, the fan base seems to have given itself a license for just blatant misogyny, as long as it's directed at Alicent Hightower specifically.
Wow.
Okay. It's like I could just imagine some of these people, like some of the things they were saying was like, oh wow, you come across like you hate women. It's very strange, but I could see them like being like, oh god, my back really hurts today. I must have slept poorly, and it's all the fault of Alicent Hightower, that bitch. Like that was just the energy I got from these people.
I mean, yeah, that sounds like the thought process for that. I mean, it's like you can separate like the actor from like the art, going back to like kind of the last point that you had, and just people are shitty. I think we talked about this in the Acolyte of just like the behavior of some Star Wars fans just going after these actors. It's like, guys, take a step back and remember this is a fictional universe.
Yeah.
And even if you don't agree with what's going on, that's okay. It doesn't affect you in the real world. Like,
yes.
And same thing here with Alicent. It's like, come on, guys. Like, you're letting your misogyny show.
Yes. Well, and I think someone pointed this out, and I found it very interesting about this criticism, because it seemed like, just anecdotally, a lot of the hate towards Alicent specifically was coming from fans of the show who are women. And that seems strange, right? Like, why is so much misogyny coming from the female segment of this fan base? And this person, I wish I remembered what their name was when they said this, because I thought it was very, very interesting. But their theory on it was that Alicent's role in the society of this show is very much her stuck within a position that fits very nicely into the traditional patriarchy. And she does not really have a lot of opportunities to advocate for herself and like advance her position past where the men in her life have deemed it appropriate for her to be. And this person's theory was that makes a lot of modern, like pop feminist people uncomfortable because they don't want to associate themselves with someone in that position. And in contrast, they like Rhaenyra because she's more girl boss feminism. You know, she's more able to carve her own path and do her own thing, and she's the monarch. And I just think that take was very. I think it really hit right on the money. It's like
it does.
But I thought that was really interesting. But another thing I saw, not as troubling on a moral level, but just irritating on like a media literacy level, was, and I think the show's marketing played into this a little bit with the like all must choose, which, side note, the tagline should have been all men must choose, you know, because all men must die, all men must serve, Valar Morghulis, but whatever, not the point. But I think there was a stan culture. You know about stan culture. Everybody knows about stan culture. It's like you pick your favorite characters and you like ride with them no matter what. I think the amount of standing that was going on within this fan base, like, was a detriment to actual interesting discourse about the shows, and it prevented people who engaged in that from really like taking to heart the themes and the story of the actual show. Because if it was someone on the team they aren't standing, going through a very emotionally complex conundrum, they refuse to engage with it because they're my enemy, you know. They're Team Green. I don't care what they're going through. They're evil or whatever. And it just it was just kind of annoying.
Well, and like those people who like will just stand like a character. We kind of talked about this on The Boys too a little bit. Of just like there's like a fandom of people who just love Homelander. It doesn't matter how shitty of a person he is or kind of the shit that he does. Like they'll always admire him. And it's like, did you guys watch the show? Did you understand the meaning of the show? It's like the same thing here. Like, Rhaenyra and Alicent are they're obviously in different positions, but they're both like not always doing the right thing. And if you're just going to be like, I'm always going to be behind Rhaenyra, it's like you're kind of ignoring a lot of things about her that are really not great. And you know, it's just, like, come on, guys. You just think a little bit more critically about the people that you're rooting for.
Well, there's something of a, like, what is it, like the baby girlifying of characters? Like, it's there's a certain element of, like, internet fandom that flattens characters into, I guess it would almost, no, it's not Flanderization, that's something different, but it's like, it's just, it's flattening them. Like, people look at Daemon and Rhaenyra's relationship, right? And they like them together as a pair, and they ship their couple and stan them or whatever. And it's like, and like you're saying, it causes them to overlook a lot of the very troubling elements of that relationship, which are some of the things that make it the most interesting, you know? Like, he's her uncle who groomed her. That is a thing that happened that people like to forget about. But they also like love each other quite a lot, and in critical moments stand by each other and back each other up. Like in season 1, Daemon, like you're talking about this the other day, just like that guy mouths off about Rhaenyra, and Daemon without a word just like goes and chops the top of his head off. It's like those things are both true. And that is what makes their dynamic interesting to watch.
Yes, exactly.
Pretending they're like Saturday morning cartoon characters makes them uninteresting, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like you have to be cognizant of the good and the bad in a way, and not just kind of pick and choose the things that you want to ignore.
Yeah. And then the last thing I will say, fucking use spoiler tags, guys. Come on, for book spoilers. And it's hold on. Just a second.
You're good.
I bought the fucking book. I'm gonna read it.
Oh, you bought the book?
Yes, I am going to read it, as I did with the Song of Ice and Fire books. But two things. One, if you read the book before the show or movie adaptation comes out, enter into the adaptation with an understanding the story is now reaching a wider audience. Be excited for them to experience the story that you so love, and stop fucking ruining it for them by telling them how it ends.
Yeah.
And two, understand that sometimes things will be different. That is the nature of adaptation. But I'm gonna read the fucking book. I bought it. Shut up.
You're gonna be so prepped for season 3, man. You're gonna be so prepped.
Yeah, but like, I know how so many characters die. I know who wins the war. I don't want to know those things, but the fan base told me.
I know, right? Like it's like I just don't get why people share those spoilers without like controlling themselves. You know?
Yeah.
Like I definitely had a few things spoiled for me this season, and wasn't happy about that. But fuck it.
Yeah, it's just like, be respectful of other people's experience. And I understand people kind of go overboard with spoiler culture and treat like every little detail as a spoiler, but like, I think everybody can agree the best way to experience a story is, like, story beats, is within the emotional context of the story itself, right? Like, it's more impactful to learn about a character death by watching them die in the scene constructed to make you feel an emotion than it is to read it in a tweet.
Yeah, exactly.
Be nice. Be respectful. But, yeah.
We'll see if people follow the advice for next time.
Yeah. Any final non-spoiler thoughts before we move on?
No, let's get into it. I think,
All right.
I want to talk about some creative problem solving.
Yes.
Within this season.
Well, I'll just say, like, big recommend. If you like the first season, I think you'll like this. I do think there are some pacing problems, but no pacing problems as drastic as like what we talked about last time with The Acolyte. A show I also liked and am bummed that it is canceled, which we didn't really address. But
that is a shame. But what can you do against the big corporate machine Disney?
yeah,
I guess.
All right, spoiler time. Let's go.
Let's do it. So one of the things that I want to start off with was just how creative the problem-solving skills of this season were on both sides of the table. It is so humorous and misguided at times, but also so like just great decisions.
I think creative is a great word to use because it's like it's like if you were making something in the first grade and your teacher came over and was like, "Oh, that's really creative. Great job."
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it was great or that it was good or that it was bad. It just means it was creative. Because there were a lot of great beats throughout this season, and I just loved so many of them. Like Damon from the get-go implementing this half-cooked plan to get vengeance for Luke, being like, "Go in there and kill Aemond for me." He hires these stupid henchmen, and then they couldn't find Aemond, so instead they kill a fucking child. It's like,
they kill a baby. And like a side note on that sequence, they talked about it in the inside the episode, but like they hand a significant portion of that episode's runtime and the emotional climax of that episode over to two characters that we don't know, and that in the book are named only Blood and Cheese. And the kudos to those actors; they do a fantastic job. And they're such fucking idiots, man.
Yeah, they really screwed the pooch. But they had a problem in the moment, and they said, "Well, I can't find Aemond. I guess I'll go for the next best thing."
Yeah, they're like, a son for a son. Any son will do, right?
Yeah. It doesn't matter whose it is. I'm not here for. I don't know everything. I'm a commoner, so.
Yeah, well, and the addition of the dog too is such a great little addition. Apparently, George R. R. Martin even called out that as a great add-on because that's not part of the book, but it adds. Again, we talked about it in non-spoilers briefly, but like it adds a level of humanity to this fucking rat catcher who goes to kill a baby. But it's like he had a dog, and the dog seemed to really love him because it sits there by his hanged corpse for like half the season. And it's like just little things like that add so much to the storytelling, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And then in response to that problem, Aegon and Cole say, "Hey, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna send Sir Eric to go double as his twin brother and try and kill Rhaenyra." And that's just that is like Scooby-Doo antics. That's a Scooby-Doo plan. Like that, it's kind of smart, but at the same time, it's like, is it? Is it?
Yeah, we'll talk about it more when we talk about Otto. But I love in the scene where Aegon is like trying to show off to him, and he's like, "Sir Criston Cole has taken care of it," and then Otto turns around, and he's like, "And what has Sir Criston Cole done?" His delivery there was so spot on. It was awesome.
Exceptional.
I loved it.
It's just like he just dawning on him. Just, oh my god, what a bunch of fucking idiots. And then
and he's seeing his like decades of scheming for the sake of Aegon just falling away in an instant. You know,
you're just like, well, shit.
It's like, I have just manipulated the public to feel bad for you for this horrible atrocity that has befallen our family. I just engineered this situation to be amazing for you. And you do the dumbest fucking shit ever and ruin it immediately.
Yep. It's amazing. And then Aegon just keeps going with his terrible decision making, but very creative problem solving skills. Where he's like, I'm feeling emasculated and ignored, so I'm going to rush into this fight because I need to prove that I'm a warrior, and it ultimately leaves him incredibly scarred and, disabled for life.
And dickless.
Yeah. And his dragon.
Yeah.
His dragon's dead, I guess.
Yeah, it's as far as we've been led to believe, at least. Yeah. We'll see. But I feel so bad for his dragon, Sunfire. Like, that scene where he goes to, like, ride him is so... Like, the dragon kind of, like, he nudges him a little bit, and he's like, it's like a puppy. And he's like, let's go fly, yay! And then he's like, oh, shit, I'm being attacked by my aunt, or whatever. Yeah. Like, whatever Vagar is to Sunfire, I don't know. But it's like, oh, man, that sucks.
Yeah, that poor little guy. And it was very endearing. I liked that scene where he comes up and they have the interaction in the dragon pits. And then, there's some other great problem solving here with Rhaenyra implementing some very strategic sabotage to inflame the tensions in the capital and turn the people against the Greens, which is actually probably the smartest problem solving scheme in the entire season. I think that is really smart. Just turn the people against your rulers. And then she has another great idea later on of just like, I'm short on warriors now. I need some more dragons and people to fight by my side. So she just recruits some bastards to become dragon riders. And I'm like, all in on this plan.
Yeah. I do love how many of these escalations in violence and these brilliant examples of problem solving by both sides end up serving just to like erase the goodwill that one side would gain from the previous atrocity, right? Like Rhaenyra probably would have garnered a lot of sympathy due to the death of Luke in season 1, right? But then Daemon brilliantly immediately undermines that by killing a toddler.
Yeah.
and then Aegon and Cole immediately undermine that goodwill by trying to assassinate Rhaenyra with the twin. And then it just goes back and forth. It's like ping-ponging. It's great. It just... And I love Rhaenyra's irritation and anger at Daemon when she's... because she's like, oh my God, that's horrible. Why would anyone try to like go kill a child? And she looks around the room and makes eye contact with Damon, and she's like, oh my God, what are you doing?
You fucking Nimrod. Come on, man.
And she accurately calls out, it's like, you weakened my claim. Like, you've made it harder for us to win now because you were impulsive and did a stupid act of violence.
Yeah. Like, it's yeah, he really screwed the pooch on that one. But yeah, it's like a tit for tat battle, and I'm sure there's more to come with that.
Yeah.
But we do get, like we were just talking about earlier, of some new characters added to the mix, and we get to see more small folk, you know. Get to spend some more time with them this season. I don't think we spent like any time with any small folk last season. If we did, it was very passing, but like we actually get some very good like development of a lot of different characters who are just like people in King's Landing or just like sailors, and they're just trying to make ends meet, actually.
Right.
And eventually they become new dragon riders. It's like, that is some social mobility, man, going from a small folk to a dragon rider overnight.
Yep.
That's a big change, you know. And I did like the introduction of these new characters because it's an effective way to build out the show's roster some more and still make those characters integral to the House of the Dragon. It's not just like, oh, here's another Lannister, or here's a another Aaron or someone like that. No, we're actually going to make them part of the team, and it's not just a side character here. And I think that's going to be really powerful moving forward. And adding these new characters, because they all basically join Rhaenyra's side, it's going to add some unique perspectives to the table, I think. Because you got these various small folk. One's just kind of like a bumbling oaf. The other is like a sailor, and then a sailor bastard, and the other one's like just an iron worker who comes from poverty and lost his daughter. It's like there's a lot of different perspectives here, and I'm hoping that it'll bring some of these highborn Targaryens down a little bit, like, you know, Jace and Rhaenyra and Daemon a little bit, kind of make them sympathize a little bit more with the plight of the small folk, and hopefully make them better rulers, maybe, hopefully, or at least widen their understanding of what it's like to not be always in a position of power or always have everything that you want just a moment's away, and all that stuff.
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting play because I wasn't sure what we were doing with these new characters for a little while. At first, I thought it was just showing the toll that this war of the nobles is taking on the regular people. And I thought, honestly, I would have been fine if it was just that. It was because that's an interesting perspective to add here. We don't get quite as much of that in Game of Thrones. As we get more in the books, I think, than we do in the show. But so much of the original show is the politics of these different families and the assassinations and all the stuff like that, which this show is as well. And just because you touched on it, like, I did like the expansion of the universe back to roping in the Lannisters and the Aarons and the Starks for the first time in the show. I thought those were great additions. I think it's Tyland Lannister, the Master of Coin, like his little side quest over to the free cities, where he has to fight Philosophy Tube, which was great. She's a huge philosophy YouTuber. She's great. Abigail Thorne.
Okay, I didn't realize
that. But I thought that was a great little side quest as well, and funny. But I think that's another perspective that we didn't get quite as much of in the old show. That will be interesting to see how all these like free city pirate people play into it. But yeah, I had another point that I was going to circle back to, and I totally forgot what it was.
It's going to pop up in your head. I mean, go back to these Dragon Riders, too, because I love all these side characters that they're introducing.
Yeah.
And,
I remembered. Sorry.
Oh, go for it.
Sorry.
Go for it.
Because we don't have a note of it, and I don't want to forget again. what you were saying about like Rhaenyra potentially embracing and like learning the perspective of these small folk, I think based on what we're seeing so far, it may go in another direction because I saw people pointing out, I think accurately, that Rhaenyra's arc in the show is embracing this like prophecy and becoming almost like a cult leader who will sacrifice people for the greater good of this cause. And you do kind of see that with recruiting all of these bastards into her cause and basically like risking all of them to see if she can get a couple winners out of it, you know? And that they all loyally follow her because, I mean, for them, they may not believe in what she's about or anything, but like you said, social mobility. This is a chance for a new life, a better life, if they are chosen, and a couple of them are. But back to what you were saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, some of these Dragon Riders, they're, especially Ulf, he's going to throw some wrenches into the mix, and you already kind of saw it in this season where he's just like, he doesn't know how to conform himself at the dining table and in front of the queen. Like, he's speaking very crudely and, indecently, I suppose. And I think that's just going to escalate. It's going to just throw some wrenches into the mix as well there. And I mean, the addition of these writers too, it's kind of like how real world leaders will forge these very delicate alliances with, albeit untrustworthy or temperamental countries or leaders. Yeah. Because when you're desperate, that's kind of your only option. Is just like, well, if I got my back to the wall and I want to try and regain this power, I need to make some friends. And maybe they're not the best of friends, but fingers crossed it'll be okay. Like she basically just gave like WMDs to like, small folk and just hoped for the best.
Random guys.
Yeah. And just be like, you're going to support me, right? Like after they got the dragons. It's like, okay.
Yeah, totally. It's like complete unknown entities as well. But at the same time, her plan worked because for the like first 2/3 of the season, right, her entire side is basically paralyzed because if Vhagar shows up, Vhagar will win. That is what we've been shown so far in the show. So she was desperate. She was backed into a corner, and now the cards are more in her hand. Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah.
She has all the cards. That's what I meant to say. She has all the cards now. But it was also interesting seeing how Jace is not really on board with this plan because he knows that he's a bastard. And he was, I guess, able to reckon with it politically because, like, well, I may be a bastard, but I have a dragon. So that gives me more legitimacy than I would otherwise have as a bastard. But now other bastards from the Targaryen line have dragons. Yeah. And so he feels threatened. And I think it'll be... I'm excited to see how his relationship develops with Ulf and... what was the other guy's name?
It was Adam, and I can't remember the other guy.
Oh, Adam, and then the King's Landing guy whose daughter died.
Yes.
I forget his name, but I like how all three of them are chosen in different ways, right? Like the guy whose name we're forgetting stands up and like blocks another woman who's about to get killed by Vermithor, I think. Silverwing picks Ulf because he's, I guess, just kind of entertaining. Like he just kind of trips into the little nest.
He's just like, there he is.
And then Sea Smoke like actively seeks out Adam, which was a really cool surprise sequence there. But
I liked that part too. And yeah, there's like lots of cool little details like scattered through here. Like, I want to learn more about like dragons and just like how did it know to look for Adam and do these other kinds of things, and how do they decide who rides them? That's probably something they'll never reveal to us. But there's like so many small details and lots of clever throwaway lines. Like in the season, there's several I think about like how much livestock is needed to sustain the dragons, like especially Vhagar. Like some of the small folk come to the king and they're like, yo, we can't keep up with this demand. We're giving them like 40 sheep a day or whatever. This is not sustainable. And they're like, we have to sustain it. We just have to. And I think I thought that was a clever way to draw this parallel, yet another parallel to real world WMDs, because nukes need to be maintained and monitored. You know,
Yep.
we need to devote some resources to for those purposes. And even if we never use the weapons, we still got to make sure that they're maintained and they're looked after and don't just accidentally explode and kill us all. So it's like kind of a similar parallel there, which I thought was
Yep.
neat.
Well, and you also have the funny element too of like Vagar being so big that she can't sleep in the dragon pit or
Right.
in any structure at all, which means Aemond has to ride outside of the city to go anywhere on Vagar. I just thought that was a fun little detail there. And then going back to the sheep, just a great comedic scene between Aegon, Otto, and that one guy where, remember, he comes and he's like, he wants his sheep back, and he's like, oh, we can give it back. And then Otto's like, walks up the stairs. He's like, no, we can't give him the sheep back. It's like, we need them to fund the war. And he's like, well, what about just his? He came all this way. And then he's like, he will talk to other people. And then they will come. And then it's so funny.
Mm-hmm. He's like
watching
explaining
it
it to
back
a
and
3-year-old.
Yeah. That was just fun stuff. But I love the way this story is playing out because, and from what I understand, the book is not like this. The show has chosen a direction for the adaptation, and the direction they've chosen feels very much like a Shakespearean tragedy to me. Like all of this, there are other factors too, which we'll touch on in a second because he put a note on that. But like, so much of what happens comes from an honest misunderstanding. Like, Viserys was dying, thought he was talking to Rhaenyra about the prophecy from Aegon the Conqueror, and Alicent is there and she thinks he's talking about her son Aegon, and it's so Shakespearean, right? Like, there are other factors at play, but like, this is what leads to the point of no return, where decisions are made that set the rest of the narrative in motion, and it's just because two guys in the same family have the same name, and a guy was not able to communicate his thoughts clearly as he died.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it is a kind of exactly like what you're saying, because it feels like Romeo and Juliet in a way, where it's like, oh, he's dead, so I'm going to kill myself. Oh, she's dead, so I'm going to kill myself. It's like just ships passing in the night, not communicating correctly. But it is a tragedy.
And I also, like, I think this season continues that trend because at the end, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but at the end of the season, Rhaenyra and Alicent make a deal to end the war. They have their plan. Alicent is giving up her son to be killed, but they have a plan. They've come up with an idea that will spare thousands. And they're like, all right, we got it. And then while that is happening, Aegon, the sacrificial lamb of this plan, escapes King's Landing with Larys. And you just know that Rhaenyra is going to show up like planned next season to King's Landing, and Aegon's not going to be there. And it's going to make it look like, to her, that Alicent reneged on their deal. And so the war is going to continue, again, when it really didn't have to. Because, and we talked about this last season, but these two, Rhaenyra and Alicent, are like, they're trying so hard to keep shit from escalating out of hand. And everyone else around them is making that impossible.
Yeah. They're the only two level-headed people, and no one helps them.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that this does feel like a tragedy, and it could have been avoided in a lot of respects, but there's also, some pieces that were in motion, even without the misunderstanding to begin with. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been rewatching some parts of season 1, and the other night we just finished... it's the episode after Viserys dies. So the small council is convening and they're talking about it, and
the coup is unveiled, right?
The coup is unveiled. Yeah, Tywin basically says, like, now we can like put our long laid plans into motion. It's like, So you guys already
I mean,
had a
Otto.
plan. No, Thailand says that, but
Oh,
then
Thailand. You said Tywin. I was like, no, not that guy.
oh
He's
yeah, very similar people.
different Lannister.
Yeah, exactly. But they have these long laid plans to install
Mm-hmm.
Aegon as king,
Yep.
regardless of whether Viserys went back on his claim or not. It just added more legitimacy when he went
Mm-hmm.
back, kind of. And Alicent interpreted that as his wish. Like, if that didn't happen, they still would have found a way to renege
Mm-hmm.
on the ascension of Rhaenyra and install Aegon up there.
Yes.
And
But
it's
maybe Alicent would have
yeah,
done some subterfuge or something earlier on because she and Rhaenyra had just patched things up like the night before,
that's
and
true.
but and we aren't talking about it as much in this episode, but that goes back to the whole element of the patriarchy in this world and in this show. It's a big part of it. It's like the Greens and a lot of people in Westeros would not accept Rhaenyra because she's a woman. And Alicent starts to see how they treat her in similar ways in this season as well. She gets pushed to the back of the council. There's that great small council scene where basically everything she says gets ignored or pushed back on, and then the conversation in the room sort of fades out, and we just see her sitting there. And I think it's in this season where she's in between the bars of the chair across from her, or maybe that's last season. But you sort of start to see the walls closing in on her position, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But
Well,
yeah.
that is yeah. I'm glad that you brought all that up because when I've been rewatching parts of season one, interspersed with season two here, so it's kind of made me wake up and think a little bit more sympathetically about Alicent in a way, because I feel like in season one, Alicent and the Hightowers, they really have to claw and fight for everything in their life. They have to plan, they have to work. She believes in duty and honor and perseverance and accountability. And then you compare all her strife to Rhaenyra and what Rhaenyra has lived through growing up as heir to the throne. She's like never viewed herself in another light. She's always been kind of entitled, a little bit spoiled in many respects, and she's gotten away with a lot of things that someone like Alicent wouldn't have been able to, like having bastard kids for so long. Like any other woman, any other lady of the court who did that would have been dishonored and just like shunned and outcast. But that never happened to Rhaenyra. Like she just kind of could make whatever mistakes she wanted to, and she could just be like, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to be the queen at the end of the day.
Yep.
And so she never really had to work as hard or fight as hard as Alicent. But then in season two, you kind of see things change for Alicent because now she is kind of in this position of entitlement in a way. And I think a lot of the stuff from season one is still applicable. Like, the walls are closing in around her and she doesn't have a lot of options. Like a lot of things are just going to be, her power is being stripped away, but she just believes that since she was the wife of the king, she was technically the queen, she should have more power, more say. It's like, well, what do you actually do here on the council now that the king's dead? Now that your kids can rule.
Right. Now that you're not like the queen, the acting monarch anymore, because there is a new monarch.
Yeah.
So she loses the like power and the like small bit of autonomy she had gotten for herself is taken away by her own children. Is very fun for us as viewers. Dynamic to witness, I would say.
Fun for us.
But yeah, like you do make the accurate point. It's not all just from this miscommunication. It's just I feel like emotionally that's the turning point, right? There's this because to me what the show decided to do, and my understanding is the book Alicent is really not that important of a character. It's more Rhaenyra versus Aegon. But the show is Rhaenyra and Alicent. That relationship is the core of everything going on here, and I really like that. I think it works really, really well. And Do you have anything more to say before we move on to talking about those two specifically?
No, I mean, I just have so much sympathy for both of our female
Hmm.
leads here at the end of season 2. I'm like, I want both of you to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, but like there's such a great contrast between the two characters, and I think that's what makes their relationship so interesting. And I love their moments of there are two leads, right? And I love they have two moments of reunion here, which the first one of them was spoiled ahead of time for me by the fans. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
But I love both of these moments so much. The first one is in the Sept. Rhaenyra, on advice from Rhaenys, goes to King's Landing dressed as a septa and sort of infiltrates the church to have a conversation with Alicent and try to stop things before it goes too far, which really endeared Rhaenyra to me even more than she already was, because it's like, that takes guts, a lot of respect, even after it's like, you know, your kid's dead, and now I guess Alicent's kid is dead too, or grandkid is dead. But I just love the way Olivia Cook plays Alicent's realization that Viserys was not talking about her son was genuinely perfect. And I love the way the way she does a little stutter. It's like Aegon the Conqueror. And you can just see in her eyes, she's like, oh my fucking God. Oh no. What have I done?
Yeah. What have I done? No.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God, I'm so fucking stupid. Holy shit. But I just love the way the character handles it, because you can see her processing that and understanding the mistake, but also recognizing that things have been set in motion that are out of her control and that are out of Rhaenyra's control. Like she already says it. She's like, Cole is gone already. He's on the march. The war has started. And I love the line where it's like, and Aemond, you know who Aemond is. Like, you know, these people are ready and they're moving. Nothing I say to them will stop this. And
Right.
the same is true of like Daemon and Rhaenyra's advisors. You know, it's it's like a chess game, except the players of the game are not really in control of what the pieces are doing anymore. The pieces have taken over and have minds of their own. Yeah, and
Yeah, I mean, they're great together, and when they're separate, Rhaenyra and Alicent, because yeah, they're really at opposite ends of the spectrum in a way, but you can kind of see that they still have some kind of feeling for each other, some kind of emotional connection.
yeah, and I really enjoyed watching Rhaenyra throughout the season, who is in a very tight spot. Like, she can't trust Daemon right now because he's just fucked off to Harrenhal and he won't call her back. And she's outnumbered because of the dragon situation, and Cole is just rampaging throughout the Crownlands. And I just enjoyed watching her be creative, you know, and explore these different ways to even the playing field, which leads to the bastard dragon riders later on. But I keep thinking about this line that Rhaenys said to Alicent in season 1, and this ties back to what we were talking about earlier. But Rhaenys tells Alicent, "You desire not to be free, but to make a window in the wall of your prison." And I love that line on its own, but I was surprised by how much it ends up tying in with Rhaenyra's frustrations in this season, because she is, in the eyes of her camp at least, the sitting monarch, and she is now subject to more restrictions than she has ever been before, right?
Yeah.
Both because she is the monarch, but also because she's still a woman in this violent patriarchy, and many of the men around her, although ostensibly loyal to the cause, seem less loyal to her as their leader. They seem to be making their own leadership decisions just as part of the Blacks. And the season even ends with an incredible shot of her framed, trapped in that little shelf, weighed down
Yes.
by the weight of all the scrolls and the histories of her family and this legacy and lineage she has to live up to, which is contrasted beautifully with Alicent, who starts to see that window that she's built for herself. Throughout this season, it's closing, and she begins, I think, probably for the first time, to actualize and discover a true sense of freedom. She leaves the city, and when she's in that lake looking up at the sky, and the way they describe it inside the episode, it's like she's kind of ready to just drown. But she opens her eyes and she sees that bird, which apparently is the sigil of Rhaenyra's mother's house. And that is what sparks her to go to Dragonstone. And the season ends with contrasting Rhaenyra crushed beneath the history and in the prison of basically her own throne, with Alicent walking out towards the sea, framed against the wide open sky, free for the first time in her life, probably. And it's just the work done for these two characters this season, I think, was really fucking brilliant. I loved every second of either of them on screen.
Oh yeah, they were both very strong, and I'm so glad that you talked about those shots because they were beautiful too. And I think it does frame them in the appropriate light. I guess since we're on the subject of our two leads, Rhaenyra,
I think.
Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
Well, there's no R in there, so Rhaenyra.
Okay, I spelled it wrong. That's not on the ship name. That's on me. That's my fault.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, I set you up for failure. I apologize to you. I apologize to the listeners. I apologize to the gay community for this failure.
Oh God, spiraling out of control here.
So I'm not normally a fan of shipping culture. I find it at times aggravating, and I think it sucks a lot of oxygen out of the room for conversations about shows in general. That being said, even though I find it annoying in a lot of cases, I'm fully behind shipping Rhaenyra and Alicent. I just think it makes sense for the story, and it makes the tragedy of this whole war hurt even more. And the reason I think it makes sense is, one, they behave like they're in love, especially in the early parts of season 1. Like they act like a little couple at so many points in time. And also, Alicent gets so upset and so hurt by Rhaenyra hooking up with Kristen Cole that people were like, oh, because she's in love with Kristen Cole. It's like, sure, buddy. No, she's in love with Rhaenyra, but she doesn't. We talked about this in the season 1 episode, but she probably was never given the vocabulary to understand that she might be attracted to women, so she never articulates that. And yeah, I think they like each other quite a lot, which is part of why they keep trying so hard to not go to war against each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that does make sense when you frame it like that, especially if they're doing everything in their power to not kill each other. That does say something about your intentions and your feelings, of course. And yeah, they've made amends. I've seen that. I see that they see each other for who they truly are. There's obviously kind of this mutual understanding between the two of them when they talk, and I feel like that they're very honest to each other in person. And the cynic in me says that that too much has happened for a romantic relationship to work. Where it's like, oh yeah, your son killed my son, and then we killed your grandson, and then now we're gonna it feels kind of complicated, and it's like, I don't know if that would work. At least right now, I'm more inclined to temporarily ship Rhaenyra and Mysaria. After their little romantic encounter, but I honestly don't think that that's going to last very long. I think that's going to fizzle out pretty quickly in season 3. So I don't know what to think.
Yeah, and I should be clear, I don't think Rhaenyra and Alicent are going to be an item at all. Sure. But I think what I what I picture is like they do love each other, and the tragedy of the show is that due to the nature of the society they live in, they were driven apart from each other, and that's the tragedy. It's like now they're on opposite sides of a war. They will never be able to like actualize how they really feel. But like Alicent asks Rhaenyra to run away with her at the end of this season. Like, let's just leave it all behind and run away across the sea. It's like, no, that's not like, you don't ask your buddy to run away across the sea with you. That's like and contrast that with when Cole asked Rhaenyra the same question in season 1 after they hooked up, and Rhaenyra looks at him like, what the fuck are you saying?
What the fuck are you on, you idiot?
and when Alicent asks that, she doesn't have that same facial expression. She's just like, she looks at her like she wants to go, and she's like, I can't. I have to do this instead. And it's, it's great. It makes the whole show work for me. This little relationship that never was,
Yeah.
But,
no, I do like that. Well, why don't we shift gears and talk about something else within this realm? The Brackens and the Blackwoods.
Yes. It's just this little bit. It's such a great sort of mini version of the show's story and themes, right? It's just such a great encapsulation of the broader story. It's like two families, minor houses from the Riverlands, the Brackens, and the Blackwoods. They hate each other. They've been at each other's throats for generations for reasons no one could even fucking remember. And I love how Rhaenys ties this back to the current Targaryen civil feud, where it's like, who knows where it really started? Did it start when Aemond killed Luke, or when Luke took Aemon's eye? And the point is, like, after a certain amount of time, it doesn't matter anymore. It's just the stories will always be told to justify every subsequent act of violence, and that act of violence will be used to justify the next one, and on and on and on it goes forever until everyone forgets why it's even happening, and everyone gets killed as a result of that. Tragedy strikes. The Targaryens lose their godlike status among the people as they rip each other apart, And there's a great shot. Oh, sorry. There's a great shot. I think it's Mysaria and Rhaenyra are talking at Dragonstone, and just talking about the war and what's to come. And then Rhaenyra says something, and Mysaria's like, well, who pays the price for that? And then the camera pans out to the dragons flying above the bay. Because, as we know from Game of Thrones, the dragons, for the most part, are no more by that time. And I think this is the event that leads to that. But
yeah, it's at least the catalyst that'll inspire that, and then it'll snowball effect. And yeah, the Brackens and the Blackwoods, like I think you just hit on the head. They are just, we've said it before on this podcast, just violence begets violence. It's just a cycle. It doesn't stop. It just keeps going until someone says, you know what, let's end this. We don't need to do this. And but yeah, they're really just this analogy basically for the Targaryen Civil War in a way. There's a Simpsons joke that comes to mind about this, where it's Willie the groundskeeper, and he's like, brothers and sisters, they're natural enemies, like Englishmen and Scots, like Germans and Scots, like Scots and other Scots. Because they just don't understand why, but the Scots just hate everyone else, and everyone hates the Scots. But that's an old joke.
Yes. Yeah, but it also, I don't know if you remember this line from Game of Thrones, but it's like, eventually you just have to just say enough is enough and stop. Littlefinger, it's a line from Littlefinger, actually. I forget, I think he's talking to Sansa, and he's like, you only make peace with your enemies. That's why it's called making peace. Like, an odd bit of wisdom from a character who's normally so up his own ass.
Yeah, for real. Well, one of the other things that I thought was fascinating about this season was the weaponization of food here. And it's a great concept to be brought on screen. I'm glad that they implemented it here because we've seen this so many times in war times. We see it today in many wars across the world where food is being strategically used as a weapon in a way because people need to eat. And if people can't eat, they're going to do something about it. We saw it very clearly in this season because I think it's the second episode when they're taking the little baby's body through the streets and everything like that for the funeral procession. All the small folk are grieving with the queens. They're on their side. They're like, oh, Rhaenyra is terrible. She's awful. And then literally 4 episodes later, they're throwing fish at them and assaulting these queens outside the sept. It's a huge dramatic change, and it's all caused by food.
Yes.
Which is just fascinating to see that play out on screen.
And that's the way sieges were used historically, right? And I guess still are probably, but the like military objective there is make them run out of food on the inside, so either the leadership surrenders or the people inside the castle or city in this case start to turn against the leaders because they're fucking hungry and they want the siege to end. And I also think it's a really interesting examination of this whole concept because it is the Blacks, Rhaenyra's camp, causing this starvation essentially in King's Landing because they have a blockade, right? But they are still able to use it to curry favor with the small folk by sending food to alleviate that hunger that they caused through the blockade. And I think it plays really nicely with the nature of symbols and omens in this world. You know, they sailed those ships in with Rhaenyra's flag, and now Rhaenyra gets credit for breaking the starvation of the people, which I think ties in really nicely to how this series is more so than Game of Thrones, like really leaning into the magic of this universe, you know? I liked how prevalent magic and visions were in this season compared to season 1, but definitely more so than Game of Thrones. Obviously, the White Walkers and dragons coming back are part of that story, and magic coming back to the world is a part of Game of Thrones as well. But Helena's abilities were super intriguing as well, and I'd like to see more of exactly what she's able to do and how it works, because she seems to get more powerful as the season goes on. At the beginning, you know, she says, like, I'm afraid. And they're like, oh, no. Aegon's like, oh, their dragons are way far away. It's like, oh, I'm not afraid of the dragons. I'm afraid of the rats. And then it's the rat catcher who kills her baby. But then at the end of the season, she's, like, in Daemon's visions. Like, is that her doing it? Or is he just having visions that include her? And then she predicts Aemon's death to his face, which is probably a really terrifying thing to experience.
yeah. For your younger sister, that would freak me out for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. Helena's a fascinating character. I want to see more of her.
And she has a dragon as well. She doesn't like riding, apparently. But yeah, we also get like Daemon's entire little escapade of constantly tripping balls in Harrenhal. Honestly, really enjoyable for me. And his dynamic with Alice Rivers, who was probably like putting shit in his tea, was like, really fun.
Yeah.
And I really liked how over the course of the season he comes to rely on her in a few ways. And she comes through for him at the end, you know? That was cool.
She's awesome. I love that. She's like, yeah, I'm just a barn owl in human form. It's like, cool. I'm so down with all this. And it's so cool to just go back to Harrenhal, revisit the Riverlands. Here, I feel like the Riverlands kind of got glossed over in the original series. So it was nice to return and round them out a little bit, build out those houses a little bit more beyond just.
You could see the phrase again too, which was fun.
Yeah. We get to see the Tullys, the Freys, small little houses kind of pop up like that, and Damon's arc here is very cool. It's very trippy, both visually and like in meaning. It feels like he's, struggling with his own desires and his own memories, and trying to really come to terms with what reality is for him now. And he's so old at this point. He's lived so many unique experiences that it's like it's got to catch up with you sooner or later and just whack you on the side of the head. And it did that here at Harrenhal for him.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit in our season 1 episode, but one thing that is distracting is about this show is how the character of Damon did not visibly age in any way, really. He just has always looked like Matt Smith, even though multiple characters went through multiple different performers playing them, and Viserys obviously had a medical condition, and that's why he deteriorated when Damon did not. But Matt Smith is amazing here. He does really great work, and I love his... in it, he has a foil with Alice Rivers, but he also has a foil in Sir Simon Strong, who was a really fun addition to the season. He's just like a funny, sassy little guy. Like, it's like, well, what would you call the husband of the queen? He's like, the king consort. Like, he's just so... He's so extra. Yeah. He's funny.
Character.
He's funny, but he's loyal at the same time to Rhaenyra. He's loyal to the cause. He's the reason she knows she might need to show up and have her presence, play into the politics of the region. But I loved Daemon, aside from the supernatural element of it, just how he aligns with that, a Blackwood, I guess. It was a Blackwood, I think. And he's like, look, the crown can't do some things, but these things need to be done. Like, break some legs for me, basically. And then that completely backfires on him, and it draws him in some interesting political directions where he okay, well, to get the support of all these people, I have to kill the guy that I directly told to do all of this stuff. That's uncomfortable, but fuck it, we ball. And he... I liked little Tully too, the little Tully kid. I thought he was fun.
Little Oliver Grover or whatever his name was. He was great. He's a fun character, and I liked all of the River Lords. They were fun. So, question: how did you feel about? Because I liked a lot of Daemon's visions, honestly, all the experiences he had. But then, his last one is he touches the Weirwood tree, and he basically gets all these visions of what's to come.
Yeah.
Really, he probably doesn't know all the details, but he knows there's a big impending threat. I'm just a piece on the board. I'm not necessarily the player. I'm just helping move things along in the right direction to get us to this point, and get all the right pieces there so that way we can win. How do you feel about all that? Because I have some thoughts.
Yeah, me too. So it's complicated. I like the visions themselves. I think they're really interesting. But I totally agree to what you're alluding to. And I think the problem is twofold. One, it diminishes the importance of the story we're watching because Daemon's motivation becomes too tied to another story. And I have a note about this later on, but it fits here just fine. I think the amount of tying into the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, the prince that was promised, and Daenerys eventually is causing a problem for this show because we all saw Game of Thrones, and we saw how Game of Thrones ended, and we, for the most part, did not like that ending. Very specifically, we did not like the Daenerys Targaryen stuff in that ending. And so it's the show tying itself so much to that specifically is kind of hurting it a little bit for me. How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat because I'm glad that ultimately the prophecy and everything, him seeing the future, puts him in line, puts him back into place. So it's ultimately good, and now I feel like he's fully on Rhaenyra's side, and she's going to be at full strength next season, which is great. And I know that prophecy and the prince that was promised, it's all so important in Game of Thrones. But yeah, like you're saying, we all know how it ended, and it's so underwhelming in many respects, and it's just kind of like a big old fumble at the end of the game, and it just kind of screwed everything up in a way that was very unsatisfying for everybody. And when you allude to that and make people think about it, I think it kind of impacts the quality in a way. And I think House of the Dragon should do everything it can to separate itself as far as possible from that fumbled ending and just do its own thing, because it kind of, like you were saying with Daemon, it kind of diminishes the value of his journey in a way. It kind of makes things feel a little empty and cheap in a way.
Yeah.
But it's still a pretty good show, and maybe I'm in the minority here, or we're in the minority. Who knows?
I don't think we are, from what I've seen. I think
Okay.
we're very much in the majority. But it's weird too, because when he has that vision and you see Daenerys from the back with the dragon eggs in the pyre, and her theme kicks in for a little bit, it's like I remember how I loved almost all of that show, and I'm like, oh, Daenerys, I'm so excited how it ties in, and then I remember. And it's like, oh, God, fuck.
Yeah. Like, it's all for nothing. She just burns down King's Landing anyway.
God. Eventually, we'll have to talk about Game of Thrones proper in some content.
Yes.
But
100% down.
Yeah, no, it's complicated, because I understand what they're trying to do. And if Game of Thrones had a better ending, it might work. But because of the way Game of Thrones ends, it just doesn't. And I would rather keep the focus on this tragedy rather than that real life tragedy, which is Game of Thrones season 8.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a disappointment. But
I liked parts of season 8. Episode 2 is a great episode of season 8.
yeah.
But
No, there's some diamonds in the rough in those last 2 seasons there, but it's a lot of rough to get through.
yeah. And unfortunately, the rough is the very end.
Yes.
So it never gets better once you get in the rough.
Well, why don't we talk about some of these other characters too?
Let's talk about Otto Hightower, a surprise MVP for me this season, because he's such a piece of shit, and he still is a piece of shit. But he had one of my favorite comedic scenes, which we've already kind of talked about, and his presence was really missed in the back half. But just the great physical comedy of Iffin's performance in that, and what has Sir Criston Cole done scene, and the way he like snaps back at Aegon when Aegon is like, well, and my father chose me to be king. He's like, is that what you think? Like, really? You believe that? He's so great this season.
Yeah, he's so great, and like in that scene specifically, he's just like, he's not afraid to tell it like it is anymore. He's just like, I don't care. I can kind of see where this is going, and I'm probably going to lose my job because you two are idiots. And so I'm just going to tell it like it is. You're a fool, and you're my grandson.
Yeah, it's like, the king is my grandson, and my grandson is a fool.
Yeah. He's such a strong character, such an amazing actor, and yeah, I'm curious to see where he goes in season 3. Because
who captured him?
See him? Yeah, who captured him? He's in like some kind of cell, so I'm very curious to see what his role will be moving forward.
Yeah. And moving on to just Aemond and Aegon, we'll talk about them a little bit together. But Aemond is so fun because he's like a cartoon villain. Like, he looks like a fucking anime character, and he behaves like one too.
Yeah, he's got this eye patch and he dresses in all black, like long hair. It's like, yeah, we see who you're trying to emulate. But yeah, you're right.
He's trying to emulate Damon, obviously, but he looks like Sephiroth with an eye patch.
Yes, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and I kind of love it. I kind of love everything about Aemon's aesthetic and the way he carries himself and comports himself. And when he ascended to be the king, I was like, okay, this is
the king
this is
regent
how it should have
whatever.
been. Yeah, king regent. Like he's the king who's gonna get shit done, and he's gonna be very efficient about it. And like he was like that from the get go, and I really liked that. But then yeah, he's very volatile, and he doesn't like being made fun of, like they were saying in behind the episode. Where it's just like you make fun of him, you're kind of toast, or you spurn him. And I'll also say that Aegon, I think this season humanized him a little bit for me, especially when he became incredibly injured, and his entire life changed because of that. It was like, yeah, I sympathize with you a lot more, and I can understand why. I can kind of understand why you act the way you do. It's because your mom really didn't give you the love and support you needed, and you grew up in like in this highborn place in the Red Keep. It's like, yeah, you really should have like gone off to be a ward somewhere, like Darren.
Yeah, and like he's not a good person. Like we can't forget in season 1, like he did like rape that handmaiden or whatever, and Alicent had to get her an abortion, and all that stuff. Like he's not a good person, but like Game of Thrones and the first season of this show, like this series is not interested in just having good guys and bad guys. It's having people who are shades of gray, sometimes very dark gray, but still shades of gray. Like he's a human being. He has pain points and suffering, and I'm glad you touched on Alicent as his mother, because we kind of forgot to talk about it early on. But like an interesting part of her character is that she's a fucking terrible mom. Probably because she was way too young to do that, and also didn't really want to be a mother, maybe. And her kids are kind of terrifying as well. Like I think that moment before Aegon flies off with Sunfire to go fight and gets injured, it's such the conversation Alicent and Aegon have is so fascinating, because the advice she's giving him isn't bad advice for someone in his current position, right? It's like, you have been handed everything. These people have had to work for their station. They're good at what they do. Listen to them and learn. The advice is good, but the way she gives it to him is so cold and dismissive that he doesn't internalize it, and he gets drunk and does something stupid. But if Alicent were a little bit more tender in the advice she's trying to communicate, maybe he could have learned a good lesson, And it is a good lesson. Like, you're surrounded by the best at what they do. Observe them. Gain experience. And then when you have learned, they'll listen to you. But because of the way their relationship is, that lesson doesn't get learned, and instead he gets fried by his brother and Vagar. But speaking of that, him being old Crispy King, is one of the biggest surprises for me this season was how engaging I found the material between Lord Larys and Aegon after Aegon is burned. Even before, tying into Aemond a little bit, but like Larys is kind of climbing the social ladder with Aegon. He's currying favor. He's building his new position. And then as soon as Aemond takes over, he kind of tries to translate that to Aemond, and Aemond is like, why the fuck would I make you hand of the king? Go find me the guy that I want. I'm giving you an errand.
Yeah.
And then, but like Larys is making a political calculation with Aegon for sure. But I think when Aegon becomes disabled and disfigured, I think he develops a feeling of kinship towards him and actually wants to look out for him and mentor him because now they're both looked down on in this world, regardless of their station. And he kind of just assumes a mentorship role on this specific thing for Aegon. And yeah, it was. I found that their scenes really engaging, and I ended up liking Laris a little bit more this season than I thought I would because he's like a gross creep, but the way he talked about having to work so much harder and be so much more when you are like he is was like, okay, I see you. I see what you're doing. I like this, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciated their dynamic too, and yeah, genuine or not, Laris, he is manipulating Aegon and using him for his own political gain, and him kind of taking him out of the capital. It kind of feels like a slow motion heist in a way of just being like, no, you're not safe here. Come with me, and I'll protect you.
Yeah.
And it is captivating to watch it, and I'm curious to see how their relationship continues in season 3. Like, where do they go? Is it going to be kind of like, like Tyrion and
Varys.
Yeah, Varys when they were abroad. Like, is it going to be something like that, or like Tyrion and Jorah Mormont, or something like that? Like, we'll see.
I wonder. So Laris smuggles Aegon out of King's Landing to go to Essos. And Varys smuggled Tyrion out of King's Landing to go to Essos. I wonder if the similarity in their names and the similarity of their actions is a deliberate thing. I don't know.
Maybe.
And also, Varys is a eunuch, has no dick. Aegon had his dick blown off by Dragonfire. Look at all these parallels.
Oh my god. We got to get a counting sheet out. We got to tally this up.
Who has a dick? Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, dickless in a different way. Sir Kristen Cole. Yeah, he's he's a bit of he's got a bit of the incel mindset going on, this guy, even though he has a lot of sex.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to like this character like at all because he's just like he's kind of a conniving spider in his own way. He's hypocritical, he's petty. He's one of the worst choices for Hand of the King of all time. And I kind of wish this season gave us a little more background on him as a character, or at least some more development for him, more obvious development to make me sympathize with him a little more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I don't like him either. What I just realized, though, there's a little bit of a parallel with Ned here, isn't there? He's a very competent battle commander who is a horrible fucking choice for Hand of the King and is chosen anyway due to his loyalty to the monarch in question, right? But in contrast to Ned, he's a complete oath breaker and just like kind of a petty dickhead. You know, he's like, it's like, dude, you hooked up with Rhaenyra one time. She wasn't that into you. You got to move on. You can't still be upset about this like 10 years later. Also, him and Alicent sleeping together in Rhaenyra's old bedchamber is hilarious. Like,
full circle moment.
They're both so down bad. It's hilarious.
Yeah. And I think something in him did change after the king fell from the sky and he witnessed the horrors of war here, where the dragons are just lighting up the battlefield, turning men to ash, literally. And I think he did see some kind of change, or felt some kind of change within him. When he's talking, he's kind of being more honest about his life with Gwaine Hightower in the last episode. And Like he's finally like admitting to someone like, yeah, I'm sleeping with the queen. Like we have this kind of romantic relationship in a way, and I'm wondering if we will see a more honest Cole moving forward as he tries to grapple with his decisions more and more.
Yeah, I think we're going to see at least a more existential Cole, because if you remember in season 1, the reason Rhaenyra selected him to be her personal Kingsguard rep was because he had seen actual battle. He was a competent battle commander. He was good at that. And I think that was probably part of his identity. And then the first battle he has against a dragon, it completely shatters his entire understanding of war. And as annoying as he tends to be as a character, I think his monologue to Gawain was another one of my surprise favorite moments of the season, because he's just like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, this is he's realized he's like in a league that in which he can no longer compete. You know,
Yeah.
The scope of war has changed. It's not.
Yes.
It's not about foot soldiers anymore. It's the difference between a war between soldiers and nuclear war. The dragons are weapons of mass destruction, and we'll talk about them more in just a second. But like, yeah, he's seen that from the ground, and he did not like what he saw.
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole different ball game. And then we also get some of Lord Corlys.
Lord Corlys Velaryon.
And his bastard sons as well.
Yeah.
Which was a nice addition. We kind of touched on Adam a little bit earlier, but there's a few of them here.
Yeah. I really thought it was interesting watching Corlys sort of lose his way after Rhaenys dies, and he realizes like Leonor, their son, who was married to Rhaenyra, is dead, or maybe actually dead, because I've read somewhere that dragons don't choose a new rider unless their last rider died. So maybe he died somewhere after he went away. But then Rhaenys is dead, and Corlys really is the last member of his family unit. And in that realization, like, he starts to follow Rhaenys's basically command to him and reaches out to his bastard to both try to fill that void for himself and to make things right, which doesn't really go over so well for God. What is his name? The bald guy.
I can't remember.
I don't remember, but I really liked him. I thought he was interesting. How he's just like, look, I haven't had this privilege my entire life. I don't want it now. I don't want your sympathy. I don't want your help. Like, I could have used it before, and you passed me over. Don't come to me now, trying to say you want to help. Like, it's too late. But on that, I really enjoyed the different ways the two sons react. Like, he's very opposed to embracing their heritage and the potential social mobility that comes with that, whereas Adam is chosen by a dragon and more or less rolls with it, you know?
Mm-hmm. He's like, yep, this is my life now. I'm a dragon rider, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we've touched on it a little bit already, but let's talk about the Rook's Rest fight and the dragon battle. The first, I mean, not counting, like, undead Viserion, I guess, in the end of Season 8, but the first dragon-on-dragon fight that we've seen in this franchise, and in my opinion, it really drives home why both Rhaenyra and Alicent have spent so much time and effort through the end of last season and the beginning of this, trying to hold everything back from all-out war, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty devastating. Like, just to see the carnage that these beasts can inflict on all these people, it's incredibly devastating, and it really puts into context how technology changes warfare. Mm-hmm. Every little, like, advancement just revolutionizes the way wars are fought. You know, going from swords and spears all the way up to, you know, machine guns. It's like every time something new is introduced, it just transforms the landscape and like installs this new element of brutality and just bloodshed.
Yeah. It does a great job establishing how the dragons are essentially weapons of mass destruction, right? Like, once one is on the scene, the entire dynamic of the battle changes. Entire battalions can be wiped out in a matter of seconds, and it's just incredibly destructive. And I guess it's the second dragon on dragon battle we saw, because we saw Arax and Vagar at the end of last season. Chomp.
Yeah.
But I think it like it adds an interesting element to this conflict, because whenever two dragons are on the scene, obviously hundreds of people will die, but also in every example we've been shown so far, one of the dragons is going to die. At least one of them is going to die, because it seems like these are kind of fights to the death. And I really loved that tragic and quiet moment with Renice and Melis, her dragon, where she buckles in and she's like, all right, we got to go back. We got to turn. And it's like, no. And she was trying to like land a killing blow on Vagar at that point. Well, I guess she initially didn't even know Vagar was there. It was Sunfire first. I don't know. It's been a while since that episode. But it's like, yeah, they're fights to the death, you know? And it's viscerally upsetting to me watching the dragons get injured and die. I don't know what it is about them specifically. Maybe it must just be the sound design of the way they roar in pain, because it upset me a lot in Game of Thrones too, when both Viserion and Rhaegal get shot down at various different points, because it's in Game of Thrones, when we hadn't seen them die before, it's like it's shocking. You know, it's this majestic beast that we've been seeing grow through the whole show and has really been kind of invulnerable up until that point. And you see why the small folk in this world view the dragons as gods. And they find it upsetting when they see Melis paraded through the street as well, because it's like this shouldn't be happening. Like, they're not supposed to be treated this way. I thought that was a really intriguing scene as well, you know?
Yeah, I liked that. How all of a sudden it's just like they view it as a bad omen, and just Kristen Cole didn't think that through. If I just bring it in the street, it'll be it's a parade, it's a victory lap coming home, and
right.
he just doesn't know how to predict the public's reaction to it.
Well, it plays back into what we were just talking about, actually, with his understanding of war changing. Because, you come back from a great victory, you bring a trophy of your victory, right? But because it's dragons now, the trophy is something that these people have been brought up to view as a pseudo-deity, and they find it off-putting. And he doesn't get the reaction he expected because he's in uncharted waters now. And that is just very cool. But yeah,
Agreed.
the dragons, nuclear war, bad. We don't want it.
Yeah, please don't. We don't want it.
Yeah.
But lastly,
and I feel like...
go ahead. What were you going to say?
I think that leads me into a prediction, I think, for the rest of this story. I think the conflict, at least the section of it between dragons, I anticipate once it starts will be very quick, because of how we've seen these battles go so far, you know? Like, they go up against each other and one of them dies. I think most of the dragons will be dead by the midpoint of next season. That's my prediction. Midpoint of next season, at least 2/3 of the dragons are dead.
I could see that.
There.
I could definitely see that happening, though.
Yeah.
I think that's a good prediction. Yeah, I guess you want to close out with the Song of Ice and Fire? I know we already touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, we already kind of touched on it, but it's just the tying into Daenerys's ending kind of, drags the show down a little bit. But, like, I thought this season was great. I think I would have liked to see the 2 episodes that were cut, even though to me I like the way we end with Alicent and Rhaenyra. I thought that was a nice ending to the season as well, but I understand the criticism that people would have liked to see the big battle with Daemon's massive fuck-off army that he built. The Starks have come down, and yeah, but any final thoughts on the season? Or predictions?
No, I think we've talked about it, but yeah, I think if I had to predict what's going to happen next season, I think that you're probably heading in the right direction. I think Aemond will try and take Harrenhal because he thinks that they need it strategically, but I don't think it'll be as fruitful of a venture. I don't know. I could see a lot of different things happening, like Jace really feeling isolated from his mom. Yeah, I can't really think of what else, but I'm excited for it either way.
Yeah. Me too. It's going to be fun. All right,
Yeah.
shall we transition to some other stuff?
Yeah, let's talk about what we've been up to lately, watching, reading, consuming, doing.
All right.
Dylan, what have you been up to?
So, I finally finished the Cryptonomicon. It is done. I've been reading it for the better part of a year. It's nice to... good book. Not my favorite writing style overall, but it was a satisfying read in the end. But it's nice to be moving on to some other stuff. So I took a break from big books for a little bit, and I read Superman Up, Up, and Away. And that was a fun story. It's like it starts off, Superman has lost his powers in some instant that happens before the story, and he's just been living as Clark Kent reporter for a year. And then Lex Luthor gets like acquitted from an absurd trial for like 75 felonies or something and starts trying to rebuild his reputation after that. And things start happening, and Superman has to like figure out a way to navigate all of these situations as Clark Kent and eventually like, become a hero again. That was a fun read.
That.
I liked it a lot. And then after that, I read a couple Sherlock Holmes stories. I read A Case of Identity and the Boscombe Valley Mystery, both of which I enjoyed quite a lot. And I also went to see Alien Romulus, which might be our next episode. I don't know. But mostly positive on it. I'll save my full thoughts in case we do an episode. But there are a couple things in it that I'm like, didn't like that. Shouldn't have done that. But overall, really well-made movie, in my opinion. And I like how it plays with the broader themes of the franchise as well.
Cool.
And also, the new World of Warcraft expansion launched yesterday, so I played that for a little bit. And excited to be back in that game. And lastly, started Brandon Sanderson's The Sunlit Man a couple nights ago. But what about you? What have you been doing?
Not a ton. Not as much as you. I've been watching House of the Dragon mainly. Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of consuming my life. Otherwise, I've just been watching Last Week Tonight with John Oliver lately, which is, I think, a good way to stay informed without being too depressed about the news, in a way. And I've just been listening to like some podcasts as well, mainly like NPR, Life Kit. There's some good stuff on NPR. I definitely recommend checking out those kinds of podcasts.
Cool. Well, that is going to do it for us this week. We'll be back. Do you want to do Alien next? Do you want to do something else?
I don't know. Let's think on it.
We'll figure it out. It'll be a surprise. But we'll be back in 2 weeks. Niles, until then, where can people find you online?
People can follow me on Instagram at NilesGotNoStyles. What about you, Dylan? Where can people follow you online?
You can find me on Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at DDayMovies, on YouTube at DDayMovies, and you can find us both here at Play Pause Rewind and Play Pause Rewind videos on YouTube and your podcast platform of choice. thank you all so much for watching and or listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye.